The Heisman Trophy, despite being the most coveted award by a player in the college football world, is surrounded by a variety of interesting preseason predictions. Let me explain. Since 2000, 81% of Heisman Trophy winners have been quarterbacks. The other 19% have mostly been running backs or a wide receiver named Devonta Smith, who was last year's winner. 7 of these winners have been from the SEC, 5 from the Big 12, the Pac-12 with 4, the ACC with 3, and the Big 10 with 2. Again, this is the Heisman Trophy winners since 2000. Vegas Odds has their top 7 Heisman Trophy contender odds listed. I'm going to list those out, discuss what I think of them, also give my final prediction on who I think will win the 2021 Heisman. This will be my first prediction on the Heisman, and also talk about some of the interesting predictions from 2019 and 2020 that we saw according to the odds, because there were some players that in the end should not have been where they were in the preseason odds. So to start off, Spencer Rattler, who is Oklahoma's quarterback, is favored to win right at this moment. He has plus 550 are his odds, and I completely agree with this here. And I say that because he, out of the top 4, actually top 5 in this list, was the only one who started the entire season for his respective team. Oklahoma has also produced 2 Heisman winners since the 2017 season, and a finalist in Jalen Hurts in the 2019 season. Lincoln Riley knows what he's doing, not just with the offense, but with the quarterback position as well. And Spencer Rattler last year also threw for just over 3,000 yards with 3,031 total passing yards, 28 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He was 85th in interceptions tied and 8th in touchdown passes with a quarterback rating of 172.6, which is pretty good, especially for his rough early season start. And then just behind him at plus 600, you have DJ Uiagalelei. Pardon me if I butchered that name, but that's how I heard it on national television, so I'm just going to rock with it. DJ Uiagalelei threw just under 1,000 yards last year, which is pretty amazing because he only started 2 games at Clemson. And I think both of them he threw for over 400 yards, and he threw, I believe, for two touchdowns each. Yeah, 2 touchdowns each, and he threw no interceptions. Also, Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney has said before that DJ made Trevor Lawrence look normal at some practices. And that right there isn't anything in the ordinary. It's nothing in the ordinary. Trevor Lawrence is a star. He's at minimum, if he turns out to be an NFL draft bust, at minimum he'll still be a generational college and high school talent that will certainly be remembered for blowing out Nick Saban in the 2018 national championship game. So there's still legacy left to be there, and I think Dabo Swinney is at minimum 2 very good at developing his quarterbacks. See it with Deshaun Watson, a little less so with Taj Boyd, but even he was pretty good. And all in all, it makes perfect sense for Clemson to be right behind Oklahoma, in my opinion. And this was the case for last year in 2020 as well. Trevor Lawrence was in second place for the preseason odds. Just behind DJ, just a little further back, though, at plus 1,000, you have Bryce Young, who only threw for 1 touchdown and didn't see much action. Nowhere near as much as DJ did, but that was because of COVID issues with Clemson. Bryce Young, really, really talented player, 5-star quarterback. There isn't much to be said about him besides that he looked good in the spring game, and Saban said that he is, for now, he's the starter, and he'll likely be the starter. It would take likely an injury for Bryce Young to not be Alabama's starter, an injury in practice. And I'd say the same goes with JT Daniels at Georgia, who is tied with Bryce Young for third place in the preseason betting odds. JT Daniels threw for 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and threw for 1,231 yards. And he didn't even play for the whole season at Georgia. He only played for about half, if I'm correct. He didn't play in the critical games either. He didn't play against Alabama, and he didn't play against Florida. Stetson Bennett played in those games, and Stetson Bennett likely cost both of those games, as Georgia was leading by decent margins at points in both of those games. JT Daniels seems to be the final piece to the Georgia puzzle entering next year, according to many. He'll lead a loaded offense, especially if George Pickens can get back on his feet by at least the middle of the season. And I think JT Daniels, personally, just looking at what was accomplished last season, he should be ahead of Bryce Young, in my opinion. However, I will give credit to them being tied because Alabama, so far, has been better at developing quarterbacks than Georgia has in recent years under Saban than Kirby Smart has at Georgia. So I will give that for why they are tied. Next up, you have CJ Stroud, and look, let me just explain to you all, and I've said this in my other Ohio State videos, even if CJ Stroud isn't the best player, like by far, like if he's just above average, he will be made to possibly look like the best player because his wide receiver core, with Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, tight end Jeremy Ruckert, Emeka Egbuka coming in, and others too. His receiver core, more properly stated, with tight end Jeremy Ruckert, his receiver core is so good that they will mask him to look like the best player, even if he's just above average. That's how good Ohio State's receiving core is. So CJ Stroud, despite not throwing a collegiate pass, and you never know what could turn out, Ryan Day has developed good quarterbacks who can sling the ball and have an effective touchdown-interception ratio and win games in college. Dwayne Haskins is an example. Justin Fields is a far better example. That's 2 out of 2 good quarterbacks under Ryan Day. We only have to assume that CJ Stroud will, at minimum, be like Dwayne Haskins. And Ohio State isn't coming anywhere close to slowing down. CJ Stroud, again, hasn't thrown a collegiate pass yet. However, this isn't that important outside of maybe the first few games of the season. He'll be warmed up by the end of the season and by the Big Ten championship game, and he'll be in his rhythm. Next up, you have Sam Howell at North Carolina. And Sam Howell threw for 30 touchdowns, 6th in the nation, and 3,586 yards, which is 4th in the nation. His interceptions, again, tied 85th, along with Spencer Rattler, for 7 interceptions. He had a 179 quarterback rating. Sam Howell did lose a great, basically the entire running back core from North Carolina last year. And at plus 1,400, I think he should be ahead of CJ Stroud, at least in the beginning. Because, like JT Daniels ahead of Bryce Young, Sam Howell's proven. CJ Stroud isn't. And at least for the preseason before the first game, I think you got to give some credit to the guys who've played long-term and have a ton of veteran experience in the actual game compared to CJ Stroud, who's basically, I mean, he's not like a purebred freshman rookie by any means, but this is going to be his first collegiate pass thrown, will be against Minnesota next year. It's his first pass. Hasn't thrown one. He's rushed for a touchdown, but he has not thrown a single pass. That's just my opinion, though. And then last but not least, in my opinion, you got D'Eriq King from Miami, Florida. D'Eriq King really carried Miami on his back. He threw 5 interceptions, but 23 touchdowns and 2,686 yards. And he was also, he was pretty good on the ground, too. On the ground, he rushed for 538 yards for an average of 4.1 yards a carry and had 4 touchdowns and had a 56-yard rush. D'Eriq King, a great deal of Miami's offense returns, and if the defense improves, he'll look a lot better than he did last year. If he doesn't have to carry that team will be going places. And by places, I likely mean to a New Year's Six Bowl. Can't see how they could get better than that. So those are the 2021 Heisman Trophy contender odds. And really the interesting thing about it here is I think Joe Burrow was like plus 3,000 at the beginning of the season in 2019. Devonta Smith, pretty similar. But let's look at the top 5 of the previous 2 years' predictions. Actually, we'll go a little further than that for some. At 6, you got Jonathan Taylor at plus 1,500 in 2019. Behind him was Justin Herbert at plus 3,000. And this made sense, and he was a finalist too, so this was pretty accurate. Same with Justin Fields at plus 600, and Jalen Hurts at plus 600 too. Those picks were good. But then you go and you read that Adrian Martinez was among the likes of Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, and even Jonathan Taylor and Justin Herbert, and you're like, what? And granted, it was the Scott Frost hype. He had a bad first year like he did at UCF, but everyone's expecting him to bounce up really quickly, and that just never happened. They fell apart, had a losing season despite being projected to be the West Division champions, and Adrian Martinez's best year was his first at Nebraska in 2018. So that was an L of a pick of plus 600. Trevor Lawrence made sense at second at plus 300. Tua Tagovailoa made sense because even after that Alabama game, his QB rating, I think, was 206, combining all of his stats. If he wasn't injured, he might have still won in front of Joe Burrow, and I'm not kidding when I say that. If he stayed healthy, he might have won, if not for the injury. So Tua at 1 made sense. And Joe Burrow did not play the greatest in 18 either. He had a massive jump in 19. Props to him for that. But the fact that Joe Burrow wasn't on this list after LSU went 10-3 and won a New Year's Six Bowl is just kind of shocking to me personally. And in 2020, the top 5 or 6 here, you got D'Eriq King at the same place he was last year, and I think this is a good spot, plus 2,000. Sam Ehlinger was 5th at plus 1,800, and he was in a similar situation to D'Eriq King. They carry their respective teams. Without Ehlinger and without King last year for Texas and Miami, those two teams would have been gutter trash. Not kidding you either. Spencer Rattler, plus 1,200. He was a rookie, so that made sense. That's in about the same as C.J. Stroud, just slightly higher, which I mainly accredit to Oklahoma's reputation for developing Heisman QBs. He was a rookie at that time. Jamie Newman at 3rd. You didn't even have JT Daniels, I think he was far up this list. But everyone thought Jamie Newman was going to start at Georgia. He opted out, and that was just, this is a terrible pick. And he didn't even get drafted either. He's undrafted right now, which is quite the fall. But plus 1,000 odds for quarterback Jamie Newman. And as you can tell from the plus 1,000 odds here, the race to the top was expected to be a lot closer in 19 than it was in 2020. You only had 2 people under plus 1,000, and that was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, as everyone anticipated that matchup in the national title. And it really, in the end, they did match up, and Fields, in the end, honestly, was in tough situations where you had to be clutch and where any team looked to be able to take the lead. Fields just, in my opinion, won. And I get that he didn't have as good of a season in 19 as in 2020. And the reason he was favored ahead of Lawrence, I think, in 2020 was his amazing touchdown-interception ratio and the fact that Ohio State just played in a tougher conference, and he was going to have a chip on his shoulder regardless to beat Clemson. And we saw that in the Clemson game when they beat Clemson, despite being pretty modest underdogs, in all honesty. And in the end, again, Jamie Newman completely out, in retrospect, didn't make a ton of sense. Same thing with Adrian Martinez in 19. Trevor Lawrence at second. He actually finished second in Heisman voting last year. Pretty cool finish. Fields didn't even finish, I believe, in the top 4, he didn't even finish in the top 5, which was sad, and I kind of accredit that to Mike Yurcich leaving Ohio State. But I believe that Fields and Trevor Lawrence, along with Tua Tagovailoa, and Trevor Lawrence was tied second in 2020 and 2019. Again, Justin Fields was projected to be the winner in 2020, Tua in 2019. I do think those three will have pretty good, or at least okay, minimum NFL careers. That's just my opinion. But now is the moment you were all waiting for. My 2021 Heisman Trophy prediction winner. And in the end, I'm going to go, in all honesty, I'm going to go with Bryce Young. And I kind of hate to say that I'm going to go with Bryce Young, but I think that Alabama has found the key to LSU's 2019 strength, secret formula, if you want to call it that in a funny way. They copied their offense carbon copy last year, and it was crazy to watch. They dominated every playoff game, and it's going to be like a 2012 deal where you kind of win back-to-back, and then it will kind of like 2013 where you're dominant too, despite losing and not reaching the national title. I think that's how it's going to be. You're going to see another year or two of absolute Alabama dominance. And as upsets seem to be getting rarer and rarer against top teams as the talent gap severely widens with all the new rules and with new, really just golden-blooded recruits that are unique and super talented, I think you're going to see the upsets continue to decrease. But who knows? At some point it's going to reverse and history repeats itself. But I think my pick is just Bryce Young. I think that he's going to do really well, and Alabama's only getting better at developing quarterbacks. I think this will be Saban's first quarterback that wins the Heisman. That's all for today. If you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and check out some of my other videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.